Good morning, class. It's so good to be here with you today because today we are going to be learning about the triangular trade. And I know what you're thinking, Mr. Koch, why are we learning about shapes? Didn't we already learn about this in elementary school? Well, hold on to your hats because, this is a completely different kind of triangle. It's a triangle that spans space as well as time, continents as well as cultures, and it is really a quintessential piece of the history of the development of the United States, which, as you all know, we currently live and work in. So I want you all to sort of think about trade, right? We all know what trade is. I have this, I'll give you this, you give me that. I'll trade you a chicken for an apple, or I will trade you my work for some money, right? So trade is a really quintessential a part of human activity, and so I want you to think about the people, the objects, the commodities in your life that have come to you as a result of many trades that have happened over decades and centuries. And we're going to be exploring a little bit of that today. So first things first, let's get everyone on the same page. We are going to be looking at our learning objective today, which is by the end of the class, students, all you lovely folks, will understand the key terms and concepts related to the triangular trade and the North Atlantic trading system, and how trade was integral to forming interdependence between different continents and people, as well as cultures. So let's continue on here. In yesterday's lesson, we discussed how the various peoples and cultures of the North American continent, as well as South America and the Caribbean, how they lived, how they worked, and what happened to them when the Europeans first arrived. So I want you all to think about something. I want you all to think about where you came from, where your parents came from, and who you are. Are you Lakota? Are you Cherokee? Are you Mayan? I want you to write down in the chat where your family is from. And you can be broad or specific. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of moments to fill up the chat. Okay, I'm starting to see some interesting answers. Seeing a lot of very interesting answers. Now, notice there are very few of you who answered with one of the pre-Columbian or pre-contact cultural groups that we discussed yesterday. Does anyone want to shout out what those cultural groups are? I already mentioned a few. Okay, right, Cherokee, Mayans, the Aztec, very true. Yes, Lenape as well. Now, I want you to think for a moment, are you Mayan? Are you Lenape? Chances are that you're not. A lot of our families, they pretty much all came from somewhere else. For the most part, especially the early part of North American history, most of the people who came to the New World were from Europe and Africa. So it's very likely that that is your ancestry. And there are still many indigenous folks among us and people of indigenous descent, but relative to the whole population, it's a rather small fraction. So I want to direct you to the map that we have here in front of you, the map of the Atlantic Ocean Basin. And the Atlantic Ocean Basin, it connects the four continents and the islands of the Caribbean. We have North America, Europe, Africa, the Caribbean islands, and South America. And I want you to think about how all of these places became connected. So there's this process. We started talking about this yesterday with the Columbian Exchange. The 200 years post Columbus's landfall in Cuba, European merchants and kings and bankers, they create a system that historians call the triangular trade, which links all these regions. in very broad terms, the way the trade worked was that manufactured goods would flow from Europe to Africa. You know, these ships would board largely in ports in England with textiles and guns and gunpowder. And they would ship out to Western and Central Africa, where they would trade these goods for slaves, enslaved people, enslaved Africans, enslaved men, women, and children. These European ships would then sail to their destinations in South America, in the Caribbean, and the 13 colonies, and these slaves would be sold at auction. And the slaves would end up working on plantations where they would harvest things like raw cotton, raw sugar cane, and raw lumber. And those raw materials, as we call them, they would get transported sometimes by those very same ships that sold the slaves right back to Europe, right back to England, right back to the workshops, so that they could be turned into the manufactured goods. And then this cycle would start all over again. You know, historians call this the triangular trade because, as I'm sure you noted, there are 3 legs of this journey. 3 legs. Not 4, not 5, 3. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, right, Paulo, that's a very good question. I'm glad you asked it. I can see a couple other people in the chat have asked that question as well. So I'll repeat it for those that didn't see Paulo's question. He asked, was it always the same ships that went from Europe to Africa to America and back again? What do we think, class? Does anyone have an answer for Paulo? Very good intuition, Stephanie. Very good. Class, Stephanie answered Paulo's question very well. I can see that she did her reading from last night's assignment. So while many ships did complete all 3 legs of the journey, many did not. Some ships experienced slave rebellions on their way from Africa to the New World. Some ships were simply lost to bad weather. And Stephanie, I would like to add to your answer. Some ships, such as the ones that transported cash crops, such as tobacco, from the 13 colonies to England, they would just primarily sail back and forth between the English colonies and England. And there was a similar situation for that. You can kind of look at every corner of the triangle, and there were different sort of trade networks that were happening in those areas as well. Sometimes this triangle worked both ways. So historians use the triangle as a model. You understand, as a kind of a way of simplifying the relationships between all of these different places and people, and the interdependence that existed between them. So I really want to stress that, class. Again, the triangle trade is a model of trade that occurred during this period. So I just want to review again that the flow of goods was European finished goods to Africa, finished or manufactured goods as they're sometimes called, slaves to the Caribbean, South America, and North America, the American colonies, and raw materials back to Europe, and they would be processed in Europe. So does everyone understand? Thumbs up or thumbs down in the chat. Thumbs up means I understand. Thumbs down means I need you to repeat something. All thumbs up. That's great. Fantastic. You guys are awesome. Okay, so as a reward for the great job that you have all been doing paying attention, we are going to move into the investigation activity for today. But before that, for a brief moment, I would like for you to imagine, is the triangle trade possible without the slave trade? Why a triangle, right? Why? So you can see that there are these primary currents. This is called the North Atlantic Gyre. So as you can see, if you start from here, where my cursor is, in England, and you sail down the coast of Europe into Africa, you can hitch a ride back up along the North Equatorial Current all the way to South America, to the Caribbean, to North America, and then back again. So, think about a river. Think about these currents as kind of oceanic rivers, and ships are able to move somewhat steadily and quickly to their destinations. And that's what sort of enables this triangular trade to occur. Uh, Anyone have any questions about that? Okay, good. I want to focus back onto slavery for a moment. So the question I posed earlier, you know, can you imagine the triangle trade without slavery, right? And you could argue that the slave trade is what made this entire triangular trade, you know, financially and economically possible. Can anyone imagine the triangular trade without the slave trade? Anyone? Okay. It's a difficult question to answer. Although I'm seeing some of you say that you can imagine that these societies could have traded back and forth with one another using different goods or perhaps wage labor. And these are interesting responses, and I want you to all think about why the slave trade became part of the triangular trade. Now, we're going to watch a video that explores the slave trade in a little more detail. And there's a multiple choice quiz at the end that's a part of the movie, so please be prepared to write down your answers in the class assignment slave trade video quiz and submit it to the Google Classroom. So here is the video. And one moment while get ready to play. Here it is.
Historians estimate that between 1500 and 1870, Americas to work A. as indentured servants, B. on plantations, C. as merchant seamen, D. for low wages. What decision did the Supreme Court make in the case of the captives on board the Amistad? A. The court recognized the captives as free human beings. B. The court sent the captives back to Cuba. C. The court ended the slave trade. D. The court sentenced the captives to a prison term for mutiny. What were the causes and effects of the Atlantic slave trade?
You could just write a couple of quick sentences to answer this last question here. So I'm going to give you some time to finish it up. Please put a raised hand emoji in the chat if you're finished. Okay, excellent. Excellent, excellent. You're all finished. I can see the submissions coming in. Excellent, great job, class. I will be scoring these quizzes tonight, so you'll know how well you did tomorrow. All right, so our main activity today is that you'll be breaking down into your investigative groups. And conveniently, we have our 5 investigation. Oh, sorry, pop quiz. Pop quiz hot shots. It's such a pop that even I was surprised by its inclusion. So this is kind of more like I want you guys to respond in the chat if you can. So here are the answers, folks. You all did great. Phenomenal. Very impressive. I can see you all were wide awake watching that video. And I'm very, very glad that you were, because it did contain a lot of interesting information. So we're going to break down into the investigation team soon. So you guys know the drill. You're going to get a packet, and then you have to complete the packet and submit it to the Google Classroom. And you guys have the opportunity now during class time to work together to finish it in your small groups. So conveniently, we have 5 groups, and there are 5 regions that each of you will be investigating. I will briefly go through each of these slides so that everyone knows exactly what they're doing. So Team 1, Europe. Team 2, Africa. Team 3, South America. Team 4, Caribbean. Team 5, North America. So these slides are available on the Google Classroom, and so is the rest of this slideshow. So you can access the packets from there. You can look at any of the resources that we looked at today. So please remember that this assignment is due for homework and you have the rest of the class to work on this. So please submit it before you go to sleep tonight, and I'll be looking out for them. And while you're working on this in class, I will be going to each group and checking in with you guys and making sure that everyone is on the same page in your group and that you know exactly what's required of you. So thank you very much for joining me, class. I will be seeing you all shortly. All right, goodbye.